Alright, welcome in. This is an original TalesSphere story and we're going straight in today. Let's begin.
My mother-in-law threatened me with eviction after I refused to cook for her birthday party when my daughter was in intensive care. "You are so dramatic," she added as if it was normal. I didn't cry. I acted. 3 months later, my mother-in-law was selling the house because... Let me back up. It was a Tuesday evening in the suburbs outside Atlanta, one of those normal, forgettable days that only feels normal right up until it isn't. Katie was 10, competitive gymnastics, the kind of kid who didn't just love something, she attacked it with a ponytail and a schedule. Our hallway closet looked like a tiny trophy museum. Gold plastic, ribbon dust, pride I could barely afford, but I paid anyway, because when your child finally smiles like the world makes sense, you don't argue with the invoice. She had practice at a sports complex a few blocks from home, same route she'd walked 100 times. Sidewalk, crosswalk, green light. Go. That night, the phone call I got wasn't from Katie. It was from a stranger who started with, "Ma'am, are you her mother?" And then the rest of my life tipped sideways. A car had clipped her at the crosswalk, a hit and run. The driver took off like the road had personally offended him. By the time I got to the hospital, my hands were shaking so hard I couldn't sign my own name on the clipboard. The nurses moved fast. The words came out in that calm, practiced tone that means they've said this 1,000 times and it never gets easier. "She's stable. She's being monitored overnight. She's in ICU." That's the part everyone likes to imagine comes with dramatic music and slow-motion tears. It didn't. It came with fluorescent lights, stale coffee, and me staring at my phone like it might spit out a miracle. Then Andrew called. My husband. The man I'd married a year earlier because I thought I was choosing safety. A steady presence. A new dad who helped with homework, showed up to meets, clapped the loudest in the bleachers like he'd been there all along. His name lit up my screen. I answered on the first ring, and Barbara's voice came through. Not, "How's Katie?" Not, "Are you okay?" Barbara Carter, my mother-in-law, launched like a missile. "Amanda, where are you?" "In the hospital," I said, like that should have been enough. A beat. Then her tone sharpened, polished, offended, almost excited to have something to be mad about. "Andrew told me she's fine, stable, and you're still acting like the world is ending." I blinked. Because yes, my 10-year-old was in intensive care, but apparently Barbara had decided the real emergency was me not being in her kitchen. "My birthday is tomorrow," she said. 60. People are coming. I already told everyone you'd cook." I tried to speak. Nothing came out at first. Barbara kept going, picking up speed. "You know, I can't rely on anyone else to do it right. The chicken needs to be seasoned. The sides need to be hot. And you're making this about you." I finally found my voice. "My daughter was hit by a car." Barbara exhaled, an impatient little huff. "You are so dramatic," she said, like I'd just told her the grocery store was out of her favorite brand of napkins. And then she said it. The word she loved almost as much as she loved control. "Eviction." Barbara didn't actually have legal power to evict me. She just loved the word, and Andrew had always let her think she did. "If you don't come tonight and help," she snapped, "don't bother coming back to that house. I will not have my son dragged down by a woman who can't even show up for family." Behind her, I heard Andrew, soft, calm, reasonable. The voice people believe. "Mom, stop," he said gently. "Amanda, please. Just try to calm her down. Katie's stable. The doctors said she's okay. Like ICU was a spa package. Like I was being hysterical for refusing to plate mashed potatoes while my child was being monitored overnight. That was the moment something in me went quiet. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I didn't cry. I just said, "No!" Barbara reacted like I'd slapped her. Andrew didn't raise his voice. Not yet. He just said, carefully, "Okay, we'll talk later. Try to rest." Rest. In a hospital waiting room, while my mother-in-law threatened to throw me out of my own life because her birthday party might be under-seasoned. Later, I learned why Barbara sounded so confident. Andrew had told her it was nothing serious, that I was overreacting. Of course he did. Katie woke up the next day, not with a dramatic movie gasp, just a slow blink and a small, tired voice. "Mama?" I leaned in, held her hand, tried to smile like I wasn't made of broken glass. She swallowed, eyes drifting toward the ceiling. Then she said quietly, like she was confessing a secret she wasn't sure she was allowed to say, "Andrew did it." My entire body went cold. "What?" Her fingers tightened around mine. "He pushed me." For a second, my brain tried to protect me, tried to throw up every excuse in the world. She's confused. She's scared. She had a concussion. It's a misunderstanding. But Katie didn't sound confused. She sounded certain. "I was waiting at the crosswalk," she whispered. "I felt someone behind me. I didn't look. Then, 2 hands. Hard. In my back." She paused. I fell forward. I turned my head. I saw his face. My stomach dropped like an elevator cable snapped. "He was wearing his dark jacket," she added, "with the hood, and the white sneakers." There are moments when you want to rewind time just to see where you missed the monster. A few minutes later, a detective walked into the room. Detective Mark Reynolds, mid-40s, tired eyes, the kind of calm that isn't softness, it's experience. He listened, didn't interrupt, didn't flinch. When Katie finished, he looked at me and said, "We need to document this properly." Then gently to Katie, "Can you tell me again, from the beginning?" Katie did. Same details, same certainty, same description. And then Detective Reynolds turned to me. "We're going to need to look at your husband's things," he said. "Clothes, shoes, phone, anything that places him there." I nodded because at that point I wasn't really living inside my body anymore. I was operating on one setting. Do what you have to do. 2 officers drove me back to the house. Not because I was dangerous, because Andrew was. And suddenly my living room felt like a stage set from someone else's lie. Detective Reynolds asked if I consented to them searching the shared home. I said yes, because whatever privacy Andrew deserved died the second he shoved my child into traffic. The dark jacket was right where Katie said it would be, hanging on a hook in the entryway like it belonged to a normal person. One officer lifted it carefully. On the sleeve was a single thread that matched the color of Katie's school uniform. Small. Almost nothing. Except, almost nothing is exactly what murders are built on. In the bedroom, on the bed, sat a printed movie ticket, an alibi in paper form. On the kitchen table, a half-empty bottle of whiskey, not suspicious by itself, just a detail, a mood, a man trying to steady his nerves. And then we found the phone, Andrew's phone, face down, forgotten, like it had been tossed there in a hurry. Detective Reynolds looked at me. "Can you unlock it?" I didn't want to. I did anyway. The password was our wedding date, of course it was. Because nothing says loving husband like using romance as a lock on a device full of rot. The last messages weren't subtle. Unknown number. Everything is ready. The girl needs to disappear. Tomorrow? It's done. I stared at the screen until the words blurred. Detective Reynolds took the phone like it was radioactive. "We're sending this for forensic extraction," he said. "And you shouldn't stay here tonight." I had somewhere to go. Rachel's place, my friend who'd offered help a dozen times over the last year, and I'd always said, "No, it's fine." Turns out, "it's fine" is just what you say when you don't want to admit you're already drowning. Before we left, I opened a desk drawer looking for Katie's insurance card. Instead, I found a folder I'd never seen before. Inside, a life insurance policy. On Katie, $250,000. Issued 3 months ago. Beneficiary, Andrew Carter. My hands went numb. Beneath it was another document. A power of attorney, supposedly signed by me the week before, authorizing the sale of our house. Except it wasn't my signature. It was a careful imitation. And next to that, printouts of Miami condo listings. Red pen on the top page. After the problem is handled. It was all there. Not just cruelty. A plan. That night at Rachel's, I didn't sleep. I watched the ceiling and replayed Andrew's reasonable voice from the hospital call. Katie's stable. Don't jump to conclusions. Try to rest. He'd been laying a blanket over the truth. Not to comfort me. To smother me. In the morning, Detective Reynolds called. "They picked him up," he said. Andrew denied everything. Of course he did. He told police he'd been at the movies. He even had the electronic ticket. Pre-purchased. Time-stamped. Barbara backed him up too, swore he'd been home until around 7. Defense attorney Daniel Harper stepped in quickly. Clean suit. Confident smile. The kind of man who can say, allegedly, like it's holy water. They tried to make Katie the problem. A confused child. A traumatic incident. A vivid imagination. A grieving kid with a deceased father. It was vile. And it was predictable. Then Andrew's mask started slipping. Not in public. He was too smart for that. In private. His calls from jail got clipped. "You need to stop talking to police," he said once, voice still calm, still reasonable. "I'm not the one talking," I said. "Katie is." A pause. Then the edge. "You don't want to make this worse." And there it was. Not rage. Control. I hung up. And 2 days later, when I tried to go back to the house for clothes, I discovered Barbara's favorite threat had become Andrew's favorite action. My key didn't work. The locks had been changed. Barbara and Vicky moving fast, following Andrew's instructions. From the upstairs window, a woman leaned out like she'd been waiting for me. Vicky. Bright hair. Bright lipstick. A belly that announced her future like a headline. She smiled. "Andrew said you moved out," she called down. "This is our place now." I stared up at her, unable to speak. She waved a piece of paper like it was a VIP pass. "I've got documents," she said, enjoying every syllable. I called the police. A patrol officer showed up, looked at the situation, and did the thing cops do when family law gets messy. He sighed. "Ma'am," he said, "this is a civil issue. If she's claiming she has authorization and your husband's the one changing locks, we can't force entry without a court order. I can stand by while you grab essential items if she allows it. Vicky did allow it, because she wanted me to walk through the house like a ghost while she watched from the stairs, hand on her stomach, pretending she'd won something. I packed a bag with shaking hands, and then I left. Because at that point, my pride didn't matter. My daughter did. Evidence doesn't always arrive with a dramatic soundtrack. Sometimes it arrives in tiny, boring pieces that add up until the truth becomes too heavy to lift. The CCTV footage came first. Detective Reynolds sat me down in a dim office with printed stills laid out on a table like ugly trading cards. A grainy frame. A timestamp, 7:43 p.m. A man in a dark jacket approached a small figure from behind. A sudden movement. Katie went down, right into the path of an SUV. The face wasn't clear, but the posture was, the gait, the build, the clothes. Detective Reynolds tapped the photo. "Not enough by itself," he said, "but it supports her statement." Then the lab results came back. The dark jacket, fibers consistent with Katie's school uniform, microscopic road grit consistent with the intersection, the white sneakers, a distinctive dirt pattern matching the crosswalk area, and in the jacket pocket, a receipt, gas station 2 blocks from the scene. Time, 7:33 p.m. 10 minutes before Katie went flying into my worst nightmare. The receipt showed cigarettes. 1 pack. Andrew hadn't smoked in 5 years, so either he suddenly picked up the habit again, or he bought them on purpose, thinking a receipt would create an innocent reason for him being there. An alibi that accidentally became a time-stamped confession. Then came Patricia Johnson, my neighbor, older woman. Sharp memory, the kind of person who notices everything and forgets nothing. She told Detective Reynolds she saw Andrew leave around 7. "He said he was going to the movies," she said. "But he wasn't dressed for the movies. He looked like he was going out, to do something." Then she hesitated and added something else. A week before the incident, she'd heard Andrew yelling through the wall. Not normal family stress yelling, the kind that makes you stop breathing for a second. He said something like, "Because of you, she never pays attention to me," Patricia told them. Katie was crying. That wasn't a misunderstanding. That was resentment with a countdown. Then the final piece arrived from someone who didn't even know he was holding it. A quiet kid named Ethan Miller, same school as Katie. He told his mom he'd seen a man hanging around the gym schedule board for days, snapping photos and asking what time practice ended. His mom called Detective Reynolds. Ethan identified Andrew from a photo. "He said he was picking up his niece," Ethan told them. Katie doesn't have cousins. What Andrew had was a plan. The defense tried for bail. Of course they did. Daniel Harper argued Andrew was a devoted family man with no prior record and deep roots in the community. Barbara sat behind him, nodding like her neck was on a hinge. Then the florist arrived at Rachel's apartment at 12:30 a.m. Yes, a florist. Because apparently someone thought terror should come with a bow, a funeral wreath, black ribbon, gold lettering, "See you soon." Inside, a note in block letters. "Stay quiet, or you're next." I didn't have to be a handwriting expert to recognize Andrew's style. The way he formed certain letters, the little angle in the A's, the way he tried too hard to look anonymous. Rachel photographed everything, every angle, every detail. Detective Reynolds forwarded it straight to the DA's office. At the bail hearing, ADA Megan Walker didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. She slid the photos across to the judge like she was serving a bill. "This is witness intimidation," she said. "This defendant has the means and the intent to threaten the victim's family while in custody." Judge Ellen Crawford looked at the images, then at Andrew, then at his attorney. Then she said, "Bail is denied." Barbara's mouth opened like she was about to argue with the concept of consequences. Vicky showed up outside the courthouse with a poster that said, "Free Andrew" in thick marker. She shouted at reporters about how I was lying. Nobody cared. When your belly is your whole argument and the evidence is on video, even strangers can do the math. Barbara stood off to the side, watching her son through the holding area glass. For the first time, she looked uncertain, not remorseful, just confused that reality wasn't obeying her. Barbara didn't stay uncertain for long. A few days later, she barged into Katie's hospital room, not with flowers, not with an apology, with rage. "This is your fault!" she shouted at me. "My son is sitting in jail because you couldn't keep your mouth shut." A nurse tried to intervene. Barbara brushed past her like she owned the place. Katie's eyes went wide. I stepped between them, voice low. "Get out!" Barbara leaned close, eyes bright with that special kind of cruelty that thinks it's righteousness. "She's fine," she hissed. "Andrew said she's fine. You're just trying to ruin him." That's what she couldn't accept. If Katie was fine, then Barbara didn't have to feel guilty about the way she'd acted. If I was dramatic, then Barbara didn't have to look at herself. Security escorted her out. Katie squeezed my hand and whispered, "She hates me." I swallowed hard. "She doesn't know how to love without controlling," I said. "That's not about you." But Andrew? Andrew knew exactly what he was doing. And in court, he'd have to watch it all collapse. The trial wasn't fast, but it was thorough. A jury sat in a courthouse that smelled like old wood and bad air conditioning, listening to my life get dissected like a case study. Katie testified, small in the witness chair, steady voice. Daniel Harper tried the usual tactics. "Katie, you were injured. Isn't it possible you're confused?" Katie looked at him like he'd asked her if the sky was optional. "No," she said. "I remember." He tried another angle. "Your biological father passed away. You've been through trauma. Sometimes children—" Katie cut him off. "He told me once," she said quietly, "that I shouldn't have been born." The courtroom went still. Even the bailiff shifted. Then Kevin Brooks walked in, the SUV driver, the man who had fled the scene. He'd been hiding for months, terrified he'd go to prison for leaving a child bleeding on pavement. But guilt has a way of dragging you back. "I saw it," Kevin said, voice shaking. "In my rearview mirror. A man in a dark jacket came up behind her and shoved her forward. I slammed the brakes. I panicked. And I ran." He pointed at Andrew. "That's him." Andrew didn't look calm anymore. His jaw clenched like he was biting down on the truth. Forensic analyst Sean Collins testified about the fibers, the grit, the dirt pattern, the receipt. Dr. Michael Bennett explained the injury pattern in simple, careful terms, consistent with a forceful push from behind, not a stumble, not clumsiness, not kids being kids. The jury listened, and then they left. When they came back, the four persons stood and said the word Andrew had been avoiding since the start. Guilty. The sentencing hearing happened a few weeks later. By then, Andrew's reasonable husband performance had been worn down to threads. Judge Crawford spoke about premeditation, about a child, about betrayal inside a home. Andrew sat at the defense table, hands clenched. Daniel Harper whispered to him, probably urging him to show remorse. Andrew stood for his allocution. The courtroom waited for the classic line. "I'm sorry." He didn't give it. Instead, he snapped. "Yes," he yelled, suddenly loud enough to make people flinch. "I did it!" Gasps rippled through the room. Even Barbara made a choking sound like her body tried to reject what her ears heard. Andrew kept going, like the dam had broken and he couldn't stop the flood. "She ruined everything," he shouted, pointing toward me and Katie. "Amanda only cared about her. Always her. Gymnastics, school, trophies. Like I didn't exist." He laughed once. Sharp and ugly. "I wanted a normal life. A real family. Not raising someone else's kid." Vicky's face tightened. Andrew turned his head toward her like he expected comfort. Like he expected loyalty. "Miami," he said, almost proudly. "That was the plan. The insurance money. Selling the house. Starting over." There it was. Not just confession. Motive. In full color. Judge Crawford didn't look shocked. Judges rarely do. She looked tired. And done. "Andrew Carter," she said, "you are sentenced to 12 years in state prison." The deputies moved in. Andrew turned toward Vicky, eyes searching. Vicky's mouth twisted. She slid the ring off her finger, slow, theatrical, and dropped it on the courtroom floor. Metal clinked against tile. And that was the sound of Andrew's new life, dying. Barbara stared at her son like she'd never seen him before. Because she hadn't. She'd seen the version he sold her. Now she was looking at the real one. Remember the hook? 3 months after the verdict, Barbara was selling the house because her denial finally cracked. Not the first week. Not the first month. Denial has a long shelf life when it protects your ego. But after the verdict, the evidence, and Andrew's own mouth detonating in open court, Barbara couldn't pretend anymore. She listed her home, downsized, sold off the family heirlooms she'd always threatened to leave to the good relatives. Turns out guilt doesn't care about heirlooms. Around the same time, I sat in a title company office signing papers of my own. I sold our house too. Not because I wanted to, because recovery isn't free, and out-of-network pediatric rehab might as well be a second mortgage. The buyers were a young couple with 2 kids. The dad bounced a toddler on his hip while the mom walked through Katie's old room. "Oh, wow," she said softly. "Our daughter does gymnastics too. She's 10, same as Katie." I nodded, throat tight. In the corner were boxes of Katie's trophies and medals. Not because she'd failed, because she'd outgrown the need to prove she mattered. I picked up a small stack of duplicate medals, ones she'd won at local meets, the kind you collect when you're talented and determined and too young to understand how cruel adults can be. "Take these," I told the mom. "For your daughter. Tell her a champion lived here." The woman's eyes filled. She nodded like she understood that I wasn't just handing her plastic and ribbon. I was handing her a piece of a dream that almost got murdered. Katie's recovery wasn't dramatic. It was steady. Checkups. Therapy. Practice at walking like the world was safe again. And eventually, school, friends, running in the yard like nothing had ever touched her. She recovered completely for everyday life. The only thing she lost was the elite path. No national team dreams. No punishing training schedule. No pressure to go pro someday. Her doctor said it plainly. Recreational is fine. Elite competition isn't worth the risk. Katie took it better than I did. I can still do flips, she told me one day, grinning. Just not for judges. That was my kid, still finding a way to fly. One rainy evening, months later, I heard footsteps outside Rachel's place. A soft knock. I looked through the peephole. Barbara. No makeup. No sharp haircut. No, I'm the victim posture. Just an older woman holding an envelope like it weighed 50 pounds. Amanda, she said through the door, voice cracking. Please, it's for Katie. I sold the house. I didn't know. I didn't open the door, not because I wanted her to suffer, because some doors don't open again once they've been slammed on your child. Barbara cried quietly, the way proud people do when they don't know where to put their shame. I believed him, she whispered. And I was cruel to you. I was cruel to her. I stood there, hand on the doorknob, breathing through a storm of rage and grief and exhaustion. Barbara slid the envelope under the door. Then she walked away into the rain. Later, when the hallway was empty, I picked it up. Because the money wasn't for me. It was for Katie. And if Barbara's house had to turn into rehab payments, so be it. 6 months after the trial, Katie and I moved about 600 miles away. New city, new apartment, new school. The walls were bare at first, then slowly filled with photos. I didn't erase the past completely, I just edited it. Every family picture with Andrew in it had a neat empty space where his face used to be, like a missing puzzle piece that no one wanted back. One evening, there was a knock at the door. A neighbor stood there holding a pie like peace offering. I'm Sarah, she said warmly. I'm right upstairs. I thought I'd introduce myself. Behind her, a freckled boy peeked out. This is Noah, she said. He's in 5th grade too. Katie appeared beside me, hair damp from a shower, wearing one of her old gymnastics hoodies like armor. Hi, she said, smiling. No cane, no limp. Just my daughter, standing steady, living ordinary, which suddenly felt like the greatest luxury on earth. Later that night, as I tucked her in, she asked softly, Do you think he'll ever understand what he did? I kissed her forehead. Maybe, I said. But that's not our job anymore. Outside, the world was quiet. Inside, so were we. Not because nothing happened, because we survived it. And this time, nobody got to evict us from our own life. So what do you think? Did I go too far? Or not far enough? Let me know in the comments and subscribe for more.